Animators and artists. Sergio Paez is an animation director and veteran story artist with over 20 years of industry experience. His recent production credits include his role as an episodic director on the Emmy Award-nominated series Star Wars Resistance and Star Wars Rebels at Lucasfilms. Sergio joins our live stream to discuss his work storyboarding on 3D anime productions, as well as co-founding Storyboardartorg, a resource for training in the craft of visual storytelling. Sergio, welcome to the stream.
Hey, Mike, thank you for having me. This is great. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. So let's start off with just an introduction of what you do. Sergio, how would you describe the role and responsibilities of an episodic director in a production, and what does a typical day in pre-production look like?
Yeah, I think this is a good question for a lot of people because they may not be so familiar with the production process. So I always say that I'm a storyboard artist. I have done many things in my career, including direction and story development and even some writing and stuff. But to me, it all comes from the story department and developing images through the artwork that you create. Now, when it comes to episodic direction and like the bigger production process, oh, by the way, my trusty sidekick, Cat Richard, is here to join me and help me along answer these questions. And so, really, the cool thing about being in the story department, and probably through this talk, this will be like the bullet points of how I'm going to convince everybody on here to become storyboard artists, because I think it's the coolest thing ever. And also, one of the reasons why is because you're at the top of the development part of the project. You're very, very close to the beginning. So if you think of any kind of project, this could be live action film, it could be episodic or animated series. You have your producers and your directors who are the ones maybe conceptualizing the idea. And those are usually given the titles like executive producer or showrunner. Sometimes there are writers involved as well. Right under them is the story department. That's the story team. And there's usually a group of early people that come on to develop the story. And in my career, and I see this more and more, the directors and the showrunners come from the story team. They have moved on in doing that into the career, and my career path has kind of followed the same thing. So because they understand storytelling and they know how to create images with their art, they understand how to put this stuff together, and they're able to run the project. So that's where you're near the top. And what a director, a showrunner, episodic director will do is they supervise the team to make sure there is a unique vision. And it's a team, this is a team sport, okay? So this is not like a one-man thing, even though there's hundreds of people involved with the production. Any production could be even a small production. There's really a lot of people involved when you think about sound and polishing and color and everything like that, okay? So that's a good thing for our industry because there's plenty of work to go around. Now, when it comes to story development and episodic direction, what do you actually do is I'm in the way that we did it at Lucasfilm, and the way that I'm more familiar with is it starts from the story team. You work with a team of story artists, and we create the images. And actually, I'm one of those people as a director, actively involved in creating some of those sequences from a script, from a written, starting point. And then those get processed through the production pipeline, and they get sent to editorial, and then we hash out the story. When that's correct, that gets passed on to other departments, which would include maybe the stuff that everybody's familiar with, or more could be or could not be familiar with, but it's like the flashy stuff like animation, visual effects, color and sound design. All that happens after the story development. And so that's why I say it's really cool to be there at the beginning, because you have the responsibility and the power to manipulate and design the story to create that experience for your audience.
Yeah, I think that's a really helpful overview because for people outside the animation industry, it's not always clear or visible what all the different roles are in a production. People tend to be aware that there are storyboard artists and animators, and after that, things tend to get fuzzy for people. So for the early career artists who are watching our stream, how do you describe your path to your current role?
Yes, that's actually a really common thing that comes up too, because a lot of people want to get into developing their own stories and creating their own stories with their art, and maybe getting into direction, and maybe being somebody who's actually developing an idea and turning it into a film or episodic or whatever the medium may be. So there's many ways to get there, okay? And there's no one right answer. My career path, I'll just discuss that a little bit. The way I have done it is by first learning fundamentals, drawing skills, learning the art skills, understanding the technique and having those tools available for me. And then after that, what you do is you get a job, you land more experience, and then, oh, by the way, I'm making another appearance. My kid is in the background. I'm in my home studio, of course. So then when you get that experience, and then after that, you start getting more responsibility because you're able to handle these kinds of experiences. And then the next thing that you can do is you start moving up and developing your own ideas. So you're working with writers, you're working with other directors, and making sure that everybody has the opportunity to collaborate on this project, but it's your vision at that point to doing it. Now, this happens over many years, right? So some people say, oh yeah, I want to jump in there and be a director. Well, first you got to learn, you got to learn how to do it. So I really recommend anybody who's like trying to get into this, really study film, really study the fundamentals. I'm really partial to storytelling, so I always make the pitch that you want to have that as your foundation, no matter what you're doing. So if you're a lighter, if you're a rigger, if you're an animator, if you don't know story, guess what? We're all making stories. So you should understand visual storytelling. And certainly if you're a storyboard artist, and the stuff that I train people on, you absolutely have to know your story structure, your technique, and how to put these things together. And then once you do that, once you have a grasp on that, you will naturally be able to oversee a project. And and at that point, you really are a director and a filmmaker, actually. I think that's probably a better term. You're making films, you're a storyteller.
Yeah, at the end of the day, no matter what medium you're using, if it's 2D animation, 3D animation, live action, you're making films. So with that in mind, we tend to discuss 2D animation fairly often on this channel. We brought you on this stream because you have a lot of experience storyboarding for 3D production. So I wanted to ask you, from a production point of view, who winds up referring to storyboard panels on a 3D television series? Who looks on it? What does the production pipeline look like after the storyboard artist?
Yes. That's also constantly evolving, and like up on screen, hopefully you can see that Storyboard Pro is there, and maybe I'll show you guys this kind of process. But there's a combination of 2D and 3D boards with what I do now, and maybe you guys have heard this term previs, like pre-visualization. It's using 3D assets to create little animatics, little mini movies that get turned into a story reel, and then you cut that together and you create an animatic, which is essentially a rough draft version of the film. Okay, it's very rough, and you see it in storyboards, images, 3D, whatever, and that's what they use as the architecture for creating the rest of the production. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So when it comes to 3D assets, though, what we have done, which is actually really cool at Lucasfilm, is we really tried to integrate the 3D into the story process, which wasn't, it's happening more and more nowadays because the tools are getting better. And good thing is, like, Toon Boom is part of that revolution, is that 3D assets give more accuracy if you're working on a 3D project. So it only makes sense if your final output is a 3D animated project or some kind of visual effect that you're using accurate cameras and accurate 3D assets. Now, you can mimic this by storyboard drawings and actually drawing this, but the representation of your image should be accurate so that anybody afterwards, like if you pass it to the layout team who has to set up the cameras and the set, or the animators who have to actually bring life to the characters, that they will understand the story point, and all of that gets decided upon first in the storyboard phase. Okay, now there's a couple of things that are changing in the industry that didn't happen even like 5 years ago, where animatics were not like the whole buzzword and the way story artists are doing. Like, even if I scrub this, let me get my pen here. I have a sequence up here. What this represents here is a timeline, okay, that from beginning to end, and I'll just scrub it, and I'll play this a couple times so we can understand the process. But this is what a somewhat cleaned up and finished storyboard would look like. And there's within Toon Boom software, you can create the movement of the timing of these drawings, which creates a mini movie. You'd export like a QuickTime movie. And what we would do is send that to the editorial department. Now, you'll also notice here, I hope you can see that there's a lens choice. If you can, it says 75 millimeter lens, right? We're actually taking the sets, the real 3D sets, and making screen grabs and putting that in as a background. Or in other cases, I don't have it on this particular scene file, but we would bring in the 3D assets in a very simplified form, because some of them are really big, so you do like stand-in assets, right? And hopefully this doesn't sound like a foreign language to people. What this is you're doing a mock-up 3D set, you bring it in there, and you want it to sit there, and then on top of that, you could either draw your characters, or you could even bring in little puppets to manipulate, okay? You take a snapshot of that, and that's basically your storyboard in basic terms, right? It gets way more elaborate than that, and especially with the tools now, you go hardcore and really create almost animated little films, okay, in the story phase, which is unheard of, like even a couple years ago. So if you guys, people watching might be familiar with like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Hopefully you guys have seen the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels and stuff that I worked on. Maybe you're familiar with even like, the other Star Wars stuff like Mandalorian or Pixar films. Like that's kind of common pop culture knowledge now. But all of that begins from this animatic stage where the story artists are creating the character positions and movements to hash out the story details, and you time it out with editorial. So that's I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but when it comes to 3D, it's a very integral part of the pipeline now, and you can't just brush it off anymore. Like in the old days, or it's not even the old days, like 5-10 years ago, you just do 2D drawings. Like maybe bring up another one that would just be, if you can imagine, just the line work here, like something like this. And then you ship that off to another studio that would produce it, and then they fill in the gaps with the 3D. Nowadays, you can't do that anymore. You really have to have everything tight. And the reason you do that is because it creates a faster pipeline, and you have more accuracy to the end result, and also hopefully you have a better experience for the audience and a cooler show, basically.
So, as you mentioned, things have changed pretty fast in the animation industry. I think it was maybe 12 years ago when we started introducing 3D features in a package called Storyboard 3D. What production was your first experience with Storyboard Pro?
Yeah, I kind of geek out about software stuff and just among my friends, because we're all like artists in the business. And between projects, so when I was at Clone Wars, I left before the transition to Disney because when George Lucas left and that whole thing happened. And I was freelancing and doing some other projects. And that's really when I got started familiar with Toon Boom. So I wasn't working on any production in particular. And this was back in the day where you guys had not incorporated that 3D engine in there. So I was we were all just doing 2D boards, right? When it was like really cool. Oh, vector based, right? And this is a way of I know that might sound technical to some, but it's a way of manipulating your line work that you don't lose quality. That was like a really big advantage that Toon Boom had back in the day. And now it's like much more sophisticated. But the first production project that I used this on was Star Wars Rebels. And let me give you guys a little background about that, because when we were on Clone Wars, if you remember, it started with Clone Wars, then the next show was Star Wars Rebels in the animated department at Lucasfilm. And we were developing on Clone Wars a 3D pipeline to directly do storyboarding and previs with 3D assets, okay? Now, what that means is instead of doing drawings, we were manipulating these puppets in the 3D computer and creating the movie files and doing that directly. Now, when we went to Rebels, we didn't have access to that pipeline anymore because it was a new company. It was now under the Disney umbrella, and for many other reasons, they couldn't continue that pipeline. So we brought in Toon Boom, and that's when they started bringing in the 3D assets into Toon Boom. And we would do the same thing in a very limited way. We'd have stand-in puppets, and then over that, because you could do this like 2.5D where you can draw on essentially cards, right? I say 3D engine, what that means for people is that there's a way to bring in 3D assets in there and draw on top of it. So maybe I'll like play this. You won't hear the sound, but this is a sequence, a pretty rough one, where you can see that there's some 3D that is just completely 3D, and there's other stuff that is drawn on top of it, which is like the line work. And this part is like transparent because I haven't cleaned it up yet. This is like the early rough. And the other cool thing about this software, which is why we used it, is it had the animatic feature. You could immediately do the movie file that will get exported to editorial. We use editorial. I think most projects do this. They use the editorial team, which is creating those movies and adding sound, to massage the story reel, and that's where you create the project. You know. But yeah, Toon Boom was key. It was clutch in doing all those things.
Yeah, I think one really cool possibility with 3D productions is that you're able to sort of scout the scene that you're shooting on, like the set or the model, and use that to make choices while you're storyboarding.
Yeah, like let me bring this up as you say that. Like, you know, this first one, if I pause it, I'll just play it. Is that so? This is where I marked the lenses, and this is accurate. Like I literally went into the set. I had a camera and I adjusted the lens, so it's a 50 millimeter lens. So this is the stuff I'm telling you guys. If you're really into filmmaking, okay, and you really want to
be a director of photography,
yeah, you have to know this stuff. And so sometimes, like, you get young artists who want to go to art school. I just love drawing, and I want to be a story artist. I want to be an animator. But no, my friend, you actually have to learn more than you think. And do you know about filmmaking? Do you know about story structure? Do you know about cinematography and camera lenses? And this is all stuff I learned. I was not born with this stuff. I am nothing special. I was mentored by other people who said, "Hey, buddy, you got to learn this, do this, change this, make this, you know, read this book, try, you know." And then just through working at it, that's really the process of how you learn. You learn by doing, and you learn by somebody else showing you the ropes. And fortunately, the way to do that and by getting in there is, the best way to learn is just working on productions and just doing it like that. So I'll just play this. Let me kill the audio here for a second. You can't hear it anyway, but basically what this sequence is the clones. These stormtroopers are coming in to get Kaz and his crew and call him out because they're doing like a security check. And then his whole gang is like, "Oh no, you know, everything's fine, nothing to see here, nothing's going on." And then the bartender, who Aunt Z, she's like the one that's like instigator, and she's like, "Hey, you guys get out of here!" And she kicks them out of her bar. Meanwhile, they have this dialogue exchange, and the cool thing about this is where you get powerful, is that we couldn't do this before. What you would have to do is you'd have to make your drawings, ship it to editorial if you had that pipeline, and put it into a program like Premiere or something, then put in temp audio. You'd have to record that. And then it's like this whole long process. And then there's back and forth. Oh, the drawings don't work. Okay, well, I got to go back and draw it again. Guess what? Nowadays, you can do that all in the same software package in Toon Boom. And you put, like, right now, hopefully you guys can see that there's a couple of audio tracks here. And then I got my visual track. It's all in the same package, right? And then, you go into, I'm sure, I don't want to get too deep with the technical stuff, but you guys who are into this stuff, you go to your export features and boom, export movie, right? And that's where you do that, and you're gonna, you continue revising it. One of the funny like little jokes we have as story artists is it's called storyboarding, but you spell it with R-E in the middle, storyboarding, because you got to reboard it all the time. And that's basically the process, is you do it again, and you do it again until you get it right, or until you run out of time, basically. But that's why you have to board it out. These are expendable drawings. So this might look, some of it's somewhat clean. If I pause it here, the line work is cleaned up. It's not pretty. It's not like fancy rendering, but it communicates the idea, the size of the characters. It's got an accurate 3D background and all that stuff, but it's expendable. This is like, they will throw it away on the drop of a hat if it doesn't work. We throw it on the cutting room floor, and you have to be that ruthless, because what we're really going for is the storytelling. So this is kind of what I talk about when I train artists, is like, it's not about pretty drawings. It's about story. And did you get the story right? Is the character emotions right? What's the style? What's the camera angle? All those things are really, really important. So You're a
I mean,
filmmaker.
I personally love how expressive storyboard panels can be, because that's their job, is to really telegraph what's happening in a scene. And I really wish that more audiences had opportunities to see storyboard artists and the story art that goes into these productions, because a lot of time nobody ever sees the pre-production drawings.
Yeah, I do too, and I'm kind of partial to it because you're right. And there has been, I've seen it firsthand. There are just some really, really talented people working in this business, and they're the ones manipulating, creating the experience for audiences with, with the help of many others. Right? Like I said, it's a team sport. So, but you'll get these just wildly beautiful, expressive drawings, and they're so simple. Like even this one, I wouldn't consider this one an amazing drawing at all. But one of the things that I think surprises a lot of people is the simplicity of the drawing. Like it's not that elaborate. There might be a shadow layer here that I threw on top, but it doesn't even have like it's transparent. I didn't even have the time to like clean up the background, and that's okay because it's serving a certain purpose, and in that there is beauty. And man, I've just seen just some killer storyboards over my career where you see top-notch people working, and it's really inspiring to see that.
Do you have advice for storyboard artists who are interested in working on 3D productions?
Yes. Couple of things that I would mention is that if it's 3D in particular, I almost think the medium is irrelevant. I almost say like what you need to get at is what you're trying to communicate. And if 3D is the best medium, or it happens to be the one that you land in, great. But if you're choosing 3D just because you love 3D, I don't know if that's necessarily what I would encourage people to look at, because what we're trying to do as storytellers is connect with human beings and tell true character emotions and make people feel something, right? You feel excited when you go to a movie, you feel happy or sad, and you go on that roller coaster ride. That's why I think we all love movies, because we want to experience those things. So a couple of tips for people getting into this. One, I would say, learn from people who have done it before. And this is where you want to learn from working professionals who are doing this stuff. Okay. And this is where I have a little bit of a beef with the traditional education industry or structure, because a lot of times you're not learning directly from people who have the experience of the project you're working on. Now you might say, well, how do I find the people? I can't just go knock on Pixar or Disney's door and say, hey, I really want to learn, let me in, because you can't do that. It's a very exclusive place to get there. That's part of the catch. So how do you work on the films that you want to work on if you don't have access? Well, there are many avenues nowadays to do that. And then, of course, I'll give the pitch for Storyboard Art. You can come there. But there are other, like either online schools or other mentorships or personal ways to do it. But I would ask yourself, are you learning from industry pros? That's one. The other one is, are you networking with others? And this is something that I don't think gets said enough, is the networking aspect of getting into the business. So it's not, that's one thing I think the schools will provide, is you're around other friends and collaborators. Maybe you go to, you get speakers and things like that. But you can go to industry meetings. I highly recommend, if you're really serious about getting into the entertainment business, you have to participate in the entertainment community. And it's easier said than done. There's, many expos out there. We participate in Lightbox Expo and CTN, and these are all like industry events. The film societies, you can go to the, you don't even have to, well, you can or not, but you can go to these events. I was going to say, you don't have to necessarily sign up to like the director. You don't have to be a director to be part of the Directors Guild of America. They actually hold public events, and I've gone to many, just as a story artist. That's one thing. And then the last thing I'll say is, you want to learn the right things. So if you want to go into 3D production, you have to understand what it is you need to learn to do it. And again, I have my gripe about, and the reason I say this is because I see portfolios of students who have spent like $100,000 to go to the fancy art school, and the portfolio doesn't represent what you need to get into the industry. And I had this problem too when I was coming out, and that's why I want to help people do that. You can, one, avoid having to pay so much money, and two, you want to spend the time where it's needed if that is your goal to work in the entertainment industry. Okay. So there is a focus and a specialty that you want to do. Like, a lot of people will go to a traditional college, and which offers great things, right? I don't want to devalue that, but it also offers diverse things. And in this case, when you want to get into entertainment, filmmaking, storytelling, movies, you have to study that. Okay. So those are just some recommendations for people.
You mentioned portfolios. What do you look for in a portfolio?
Uh, yeah, I look for, well, there's a couple of things. I've been in the hiring process, and I've met a bunch of people, and we've talked about these things when we're looking for artists. One, I still think this is the case. Qualified story artists, and when it comes to that particular portfolio, are really few and far between. The portfolios that are needed on the majority of them just don't make the cut. They don't show enough of what is needed to fulfill the job requirements, and so most of the time they gets passed on. And I say this to some people because they, like, everybody wants to work at Pixar. They open up the internship, and then they get flooded with like hundreds of portfolios. But honestly, about 90% of those portfolios they just pass on because they don't have the basic requirements of what you need for your portfolio, and maybe only that 10% actually do. And then you have to filter through those people. And most of the time, the good people are working, and the ones that know what have the experience. So, well, what do you put in a portfolio? How do you get that experience? Again, it goes back to, like, well, seek out the information for people that can show you that and have done it before. But I'll give you guys a couple of tips. One, if you want to apply as a storyboard artist, the first simple thing is show storyboards. You just need a lot of storyboard sequences. Some people put in figure drawings, and they put in like their sculpture and graphic design. No, you got to get really specific. They're looking to see your filmmaking and storytelling style. Okay. And how you show that through your drawings, your ability to actually create the drawings. Now, they will also look to see if you can draw well. That you have to have your good anatomy, good perspective, all of the like foundation of art should be there. And the way you show that is because you can draw it in your storyboard. You don't have to necessarily have a perspective example aside from that. Like, you would show solid perspective by drawing really cool buildings and really solid characters in perspective in your composition. That's how people would identify that. So there are a couple check boxes that you want. You want to show the foundation. So I just mentioned a couple drawing skills. Perspective is huge. Understanding the difference between camera lenses. Then the other one is, what is your storytelling style? You need to show that in your portfolio. It's a good thing to show in your portfolio. That how you can handle a dramatic sequence, how you can handle a comedy sequence, what ideas you bring to the table. Is your staging good? And this is a word, hopefully, if you don't know what I'm talking about and you want to get into this, go look it up, understand what this means. It is the choreography and the arrangement of your characters in the scene that you design, and that those choices are what people are looking for. Can you do it? Can you do it well? Can you do it in a creative and unique way? And those are things that you want to show in your portfolio through the sequences and examples that you have. So we have a mentorship program where we show people how to do this. And the cool thing is we're getting really good at producing pro artists. And we have a number of students that have went through this. In fact, I'm really proud of, and they did the work. I mean, I guess we lend ourselves to look over their shoulder and give the structure of the program, but they're doing the work, and they put together their ideas, and they're a unique person. And one of our artists, Caroline, she just got accepted to the Disney internship program. It's a very exclusive internship program.
That's so cool.
Yeah, but her stuff is great, just really great ideas, and I think she's going to do really well. And so that's the start of a really strong career. And we have other artists that have gone on to Disney and other places and are now working. One guy just was doing movies, and now I just got hired actually in Canada too to work at a game studio developing their cinematics and in-house projects. So there's all kinds of ways to get work on this, but I think in terms of portfolio, yeah, it's the focus, it's the understanding what is needed in the jobs. Oh, and I should say this, Mike, too, because when people, if they're applying for Pixar, it's a different portfolio than the one that you're going to apply for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or for a video game company. You also have to know who you're applying to and design your portfolio for them. And
That's so important.
Yeah, and so if you know they're doing more comedy stuff, well, guess what? You have to throw in more comedy into your portfolio and show you can do that. If they're doing more action-based stuff, well, you have to have action in your portfolio. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult for them to give you a call. Yeah.
So you mentioned storyboardartorg. Can you tell us a little bit about it, give us the elevator pitch, and what events led to you co-founding that organization?
Yeah, like this started out at probably typical how these things start. It was the necessity that to train artists in story skills. So let me back up a little bit. Let me mention to you guys what that is. So storyboardartorg is an online platform for visual storytelling. We train artists to become visual storytellers, and we, in particular, our flagship program is a mentorship program where we take artists for a year inside our program and learn from other pro artists. It's not just myself, but we have 4 other pro, really seasoned guys that worked on Disney, DreamWorks, Illumination, all of the big movies. And we show them what to do as almost like story supervisor, looking over their shoulder and training them and showing them the ropes of what to do. By the end of that program, you get a portfolio, and we're building up the portfolio as we're doing this, and then that's what you're going to use to get work. And we talk a lot about insider stuff there too. But it all started because we were doing training at Lucasfilm and trying to train 3D artists into become storytellers. So we'd take the technical 3D guys, and then they got into the story department. And then once we were there, I found out, these guys, they have to learn the visual storytelling techniques. They didn't understand how to create a scene. So I thought, oh man, this is actually harder than I thought it was. I'd been at it for a number of years and had it beaten into me. So I knew the foundation pretty well at that point. So I said, well, maybe other people want to learn this stuff. So we started doing just classes. The first time we did something was like on Craigslist with my other buddy Anthony, and to my surprise, we filled out the class. It was just like maybe 30 people or so showed up, but it was like, oh, other people really are into this. This was back in 2008. So we've been around a while. And so then we moved on to the online sphere, and now I think we're much more established and sophisticated to be the place where we're training people because there's a big hole that I see with story training in universities and any other kind of online school, because they're not training you as you would on the job. Pixar in particular has that, like Pixar University. Maybe you guys have heard of it. If I have my numbers correct, it's I think it's 6 months of 40-hour a week, full-time work, just story work and training. That's the internship program, and it's intensive, 8 hours a day, working on story problems by the very heavyweight story guys that are inside of Pixar. And if you like their movies, you'll know the quality of the people there. And after that 6 months, there's no guarantee that you're going to get a job on the story team. You have to apply to even get into the studio, into the story team after that internship program, right? Hopefully by then you've done enough work that you have good stuff to show. But that's how difficult it really is. But that training is so intense, and we're trying to somewhat give that to anybody who wants to learn through our program. But it's just a resource. It's just a resource I wish I had when I was coming up in the industry, basically.
Do you want to talk about some of the mentors that are working with storyboard art and instructors?
Oh, yeah, I should mention these guys. They're great. So I did an interview just yesterday with Steve Lee, who was another director at Star Wars on Star Wars Rebels. He's a longtime animation veteran. He's done everything, and he's super, really talented. And he's a great teacher. Very lucky to have him as a mentor. He's one of the guys that's going to be mentoring people there too. Another guy that I worked at, we all just happen to be in this Lucasfilm Star Wars community. Another guy, Douglas Lovelace, who also worked on Star Wars Rebels, but went on to direct Puss in Boots and some other things for DreamWorks, and he was at Illumination. Just ultra talented story artist is the other instructional mentor that we have on there. and he's going to be joining us for this round. We have a registration open right now in September. We do seasonal openings. And then Lincoln Adams, who actually was an early member of Storyboard Art. He has a really great story for us because I met him like maybe 10 years ago, and he started getting into visual storytelling. We kept in touch over the years, and he was a good illustrator, but he hadn't done the storytelling, visual film language kind of stuff that you need as a storyboard artist. He really loved it. He worked at it, and now he's just a veteran guy, and he worked on Despicable Me 2 and a bunch of other things for Illumination. He worked on Ron's Gone Wrong that came out of Locksmith Studio recently. And so he's also a mentor on us, on our team. And lastly, I should mention two more guys, is Eric Kuska, who is working at 20th Century Fox. He's just the most hilarious and talented person. He was also one of our alumni, and he has come back to help the students out. He's really great. And then Chad Pickrell, who's our moderator and kind of team leader there for the program. So he's also a big part of what we do. But this is the team. This is a story team that you would have at any other studio, and you would train with them and hopefully come up. And this is how I came up. This is how other people that I know have done this. And I've seen it many times. It's actually really amazing that when you have the right ingredients and you have the passion, if you're really into this, the growth is amazing. You really can do this. You can explode. So if you feel like, oh man, I don't know if I'm good enough, it looks so hard, what you're doing is, so cool. You might get intimidating by seeing all these fantastic artists like on Instagram or something like that. But they all started somewhere. Okay, that's the truth. And guess what? They probably all sucked at the beginning. We all did. Okay, and so now what we got to do is, if you have the right ingredients and you're willing to apply yourself, boom, you can just skyrocket like, Caroline and that I mentioned, or Kylie Gay, who's working at Disney, or Kenny Valenka is another guy who's just a really good buddy now. He came to me when he was 19, and he's like, look, man, I only have this much money. What should I do? I said, send me your work. Let me see what you got. And he was really talented. He had really good drawing skills. And I said, you're exactly the type of person that we can mold into a story artist. And boom, 1 year later, you got hired by Disney. So that's great. That's on him, that he was willing to work hard and has a really a bright career future there. So if you guys are into filmmaking, into doing this stuff, learn some Toon Boom. It's not, the resources are there. Right? That before, it was like, when I was coming up, there was nothing around. Like, we were handing out photocopies of somebody's speech or lecture that they gave. Oh man, I got one. Stuff that like Brad Bird handed around, that get one floating around in the industry or something. But nowadays, it's so much easier there's access to material. And guess what that does to me, Mike? It's like the industry will get better because there are better storytellers. That's the way I see
Definitely.
it. And, and they're starting younger, which is kind of exciting. To me, it's exciting.
I would definitely be kicking myself if I did not ask you about Star Wars. So I noticed recently that Star Wars characters which originated in animation, like Ahsoka and the Fifth Brother, have recently appeared in live-action productions. How does it feel to see these characters in new settings, along with new attention to source material that you worked on?
Man, I think it's great. And I would bet money on the fact that it has a lot to do with Dave Filoni and him pushing, especially for Ahsoka. That was his baby character. And I think he's been pushing for years to get that, transition into like the standard canon and the live action series. But I can tell you, when we were working on Star Wars Rebels, like the fans loved the crossover from this. So I think from a point of view of incorporating, just creating this wider universe when it comes to Star Wars, and there's so many diehard fans, it's like those that love these characters and they've seen them progress from the saga, now that they're coming into other stories, I see it as a really cool and exciting development. Like, I think we were talking earlier, and I mentioned that one of the characters from the books, Thrawn, who was a villain that showed up in Star Wars Rebels, like the fans went crazy when he actually came in. Like, and that wasn't it was certainly planned, but they didn't announce it till it actually happened. And and I thought he was just the coolest character. He had a wonderful voice actor do the voice, and the same thing with Ahsoka. I mean, her development now from, this was obviously, I said Dave was the one to create the character design. George Lucas was the one to come up with the concept, and so it's this like collaboration from the George era that started out as a Padawan character, right? And she was like basically a kid, and even when she came out, like there was like some bit of controversy because like, where'd she come from? What? All of a sudden now she's Anakin. When did he have a Padawan? Like that it wasn't part of the canon. But guess what? George Lucas, the canon is basically George, right? So, so when he established that character, now that we see this progress and she's come into like adulthood and a Jedi, and like there's the whole character, and it's really rounding out a character and creating it like full circle, and it's just really deep. And I think that makes the experience so much cooler. So I'm a big supporter of that and big fan, and hopefully that will also appease a lot of the people who have been following Star Wars for a while.
All right, so we're starting to run out of time. Were there anything else from that scene that you wanted to show the audience in terms of storyboarding for 3D productions?
Yeah, good question. So I guess maybe what I didn't gloss over too much is the process. And this is something I think it's important for people to understand, that you don't just start out by creating really finished images, even in the 3D process. So imagine you have 3D sets that you're going to have, like this was an established bar scene that we already knew existed, that was modeled and created by the designers. And then what you do is you go and scout it out with like cameras, and you go into the 3D program, you move it around as if imagine you're walking into a new space, like a new restaurant location or bar location on a live action set. You need to know where you're going to place the camera, where the characters are going to be, and where all that is happening. So you create rough sketches and rough drawings. Now this is probably not the first pass because there's somewhat cleaned up line work here. But you notice, okay, here's a table. Okay, where is that in location to the rest of the bar? The character, this droid character has to come in. So now we're going to put the camera low to the floor. So we got to make sure that there's enough room for that character to walk, right? So things like that, when you're doing a 3D production, you have to understand the restrictions of the set, okay? Then this one actually has a lot of characters in the scene. Let me go forward a little bit, where like here there's right now there's like 5 characters in the scene. Most of them are in the middle ground. There's one in the foreground. But the physical placement of those characters has to be accurate. Because what happens if you don't do this, you can cheat things a lot in animation, right? The animators who actually have to put these characters in their set and actually make them move and have them come alive, they'll be intersecting with each other and they won't have enough room. So imagine you're on a dance floor and all of a sudden you're like bunched up. You can't move with like a big party going on. Or, if you spread things out, then you have like a little more room to manipulate and act. So you have to keep that in mind when it comes to storytelling and setting up your shots. Like even this one, you notice Kaz here does like a big movement with his hands. He's trying to make a joke and play off the tension that's happening in the scene. And then the camera does a little adjustment over to the bartender Z, and then you cut to her. So knowing how those cameras are going to flow makes sense. And being able to do that without having to create a special new set is something that's very efficient for the production. And like, for example, if instead of having a character here in the foreground at the beginning, imagine if there was a wall, like a 3D wall. Now you could push the camera right through that. But again, when you go back to the animators and the animators say, well, I can't, because there's a 3D wall here. Like if I had to take it out, you got to call the modeler. They got to do some special adjustment. It costs money, time, all these things. So that's where you have to be a smart filmmaker, a smart storyteller. Imagine if there was a real object there, what you would do, and understand the limitations of your set. Now that's probably the basics of it. Then the next thing on top of that is what is the flair that you can put there? What is your unique interpretation of the material? And that's where you got to do your research and understand the necessity of the scene, and you put your own personal style on it. That's how you would somewhat go about this stuff.
Yeah, one thing that really strikes me is I really enjoy seeing how grounded storyboarding for 3D productions can really be with that set that you can play with. Um, from your point of view, like what would be some of the challenges if you wouldn't have been able to use like a 3D camera?
Yeah, I think you're just guessing at that point. You're probably, you can get pretty accurate in your terms of guessing if you understand the material. But in like for example, in this one, let me go back to the one where I actually called out the lens numbers. Like something like this, I'm saying 75 millimeter lens, which is a very long, it's a relatively long lens. If you didn't understand what was in the background, you could probably have some random objects there if you pass that off to if you were just guessing and you pass that off to the layout department. And oftentimes studios have other overseas studios nowadays, and they're working with different people from different locations. So that collaboration can be difficult if you have an issue. So if that person threw the camera in there and placed the characters, they may not have a composition that would work for the story point that you're doing. Now, this is a relatively simple shot here, but let me see, like even some of the stuff at the beginning here. Let me go to the first part of this sequence where they're walking in here. You want to set up the environment. You see how we placed a character here in the bar. There's also the bartender character in the foreground. If you didn't know the actual sizes of those things, you're at a disadvantage. And that's why it is, if you have the opportunity to look through a 3D camera, it's just so much better. VR is another tool that, is coming into play, and people are experimenting with to see how that can work in filmmaking and stuff. But even if you didn't have the set, like nowadays you can go into another program, go into Toon Boom, maybe you can open up Maya or Blender, and then just create a stand-in character and estimate and see if you can get something that might get you to closer to the right result that you're looking for than just winging it as we did before. We'd come up with like rough drawings and then we'd expect other people to solve it. And I don't see that as the best approach now that the tools are available.
All right, Sergio, this was delightful. Where can our viewers find more of your work?
Well, if you want to find out more about me, shameless plug is go to sergiopaez.com and my name, and you'll see some of my background. I think I even have some storyboard examples there and portfolio stuff. I do now more story development and directing, so you'll see that represented there. But yeah, and you can also hit me up on social media. I would say if you're serious about getting into this stuff, go check us out on storyboardartorg, and you'll see a lot of the talks that I do and also the other mentors there. And I really think we're one of the few places offering the stuff that we do, because it's what I've specialized in my career. And for some reason, I don't know why, I guess we are the unsung hero. I feel like we're the unsung hero in the story department, that the animators get all the limelight, and maybe the character designers, the concept designers get all the showcase because they have pretty stuff, but the story team is always in the background, and maybe that's why we haven't been as represented. But I feel like we're one of the only places at Storyboard Art to show this stuff and teach people how to do it. And hopefully you guys would check us out too.
All right, before we end the interview, is there anything else that you'd like to say to our audience?
Yeah, I just want to give people encouragement for this, because if you're anything like me, when I came up in this business, I had a dream about doing this. I was really passionate about it. I didn't know how, and I was really scared. Okay, I would just say this is keep up that passion, watch films, and don't ever forget why you got into this, because you love it. And many people will not understand why you did it. Maybe you're not your family, your friends. They're like, you're going to be a starving artist. You're crazy. And I'm here to tell you that is all false. You can do this. You can have a very lucrative and successful career in the entertainment business and as a story artist if you are able to get the right information, and you can work on the projects that you want, that you love, and do create art for a living and make a living with your art. That is possible nowadays.
All right. Sergio, thank you so much for joining us today on this live stream discussion. And thank you for everybody who joined as the audience. If you enjoyed learning about the craft of storyboarding for 3D productions and would like to try Storyboard Pro, you can download a 21-day trial from our website, that is toonboom.com. And if you're interested in more interviews about the animation industry, you won't want to miss next week's discussion with David B. Levy on his book, Your Animated Career, How to Survive and Thrive. Let us know what you thought of today's interview and be sure to tune in next time.
Thanks, Mike.